Hello everybody, welcome back to today's video. Today we are going to be going over the prediction for the United States Senate later this year, 2026. Please make sure to like and subscribe before we continue. Really helps the channel out. If you like unbiased, no nonsense election content regarding upcoming elections throughout the United States. Okay, let's get into it. Now, as always, I will say, just because the Democrats are out of power, they should be somewhat favored. I'm taking that into effect. This isn't a best case scenario for either party. This is prediction for the month of February. Um, so we'll see. My guess is that it's going to be like a D+4 environment, just about. So it's going to be considerably to the left of what we saw in 2024. Um, Maybe even a slightly bluer, or we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Maybe Republicans do well. We're gonna have to just see how it goes. But I'm taking it into effect. Democrats probably have a better chance at flipping the United States House, the United States Senate, but it'll still be hotly contested. Republicans are looking to keep the Senate to be able to pass legislation for Republican President Donald Trump. All right, so let's get into it. I'm gonna just fill out all the safe Democrat states. They should be safe Democrat regardless of what happens. They really shouldn't be competitive at all. Um, is basically it with the safe Democratic states. I don't really see any other state becoming safe Democrat. You see a few likely states move up to safe. New Mexico should probably be safe. Virginia should be safe just because of the environment. And then you have all your other typical safe Democrat states. We'll fill out the safe Republican states, states that Republicans should win without a problem. Shouldn't really have much of a competition. I shouldn't see. Um, well, hold on. Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky. Yeah. I will say I'm going to fit Florida in. I just think that Florida has moved too far to the right for the Democrats to really contest. They're running Alexander Vindman, who is the brother of Congressman Eugene Vindman from Virginia. But it's weird. You have a Vindman running in Florida. So we'll see how that pans out. I don't know if he's the strongest candidate yet. It's yet to be seen. Um, Republicans are running Ashley Moody, who is the incumbent U.S. Senator. She's a pretty strong incumbent. She was the Attorney General. She even overperformed Ron DeSantis in 2022. So I can't really see a popular incumbent lose in a right trending state, especially because Donald Trump won it by over 10. I mean, so did Rick Scott. So I really don't think Florida will get down to likely. But that is all with the safe states on both sides. We'll start with likely Democratic states. There'll be quite a few of them. Minnesota, their governor's race is already looking like it'll be a safe Democrat because you have Amy Klobuchar running. However, this Senate Democrats in Minnesota might be a game of musical chairs because it looks like the nominee is going to be Peggy Flanagan. She's not the strongest candidate, so she'll probably win by around 5 to 7 points. Likely Democratic. She's probably going to be Congresswoman Angie Craig. However, she's going to try to get the Senate appointment from Amy Klobuchar if she becomes governor. So it's kind of interesting to see how that's going to play out. But Minnesota is definitely a likely Democratic state. Well, it's been up in the news a lot, so we'll see if that kind of reflects how Minnesota will end up voting in 2026. Another likely Democratic state, which is the only other one, is New Hampshire. Problem for Republicans that they have a Republican president in the White House, and if I saw Joe Biden in the White House, I could definitely see this race being very competitive. But as of now, I can't just. I feel like Chris Pappas only winning by around 1 to 3 points just doesn't seem reasonable at the time currently right now, just because it seems that Democrats are winning the generic ballot according to polling by around 4 to 6 points. And New Hampshire does tend to be kind of liberal at the federal level, kind of like how it's conservative at the state level. But it just seems that Chris Pappas is only gaining in the polls despite John Sununu becoming the Republican nominee. He's a good candidate, don't get me wrong, and he's definitely going to make this race as close as it can get. That normally would. But I just think Chris Pappas is probably going to win around 8 points just because of the national environment. It's hard to see this race becoming competitive under this circumstance, no matter who the candidates are. So yeah, it's going to be a likely Democratic win. Now we will get to the likely Republican states. We will quite a few of them. We'll start with Texas. It's really hard to say who's going to win the primary for both sides. For the Democrats, it's either Jasmine Crockett or James Talarico. Talarico's sort of the more electable Democrat. Crockett's the more controversial, anti-establishment, progressive Democrat. That's going to be a competitive primary. I think Crockett loses the primary. If Republicans nominate Ken Paxton, he's the least electable out of the three Republicans running. Two more electable ones are John Cornyn, who's more establishment, and Wesley Hunt, who's kind of in the middle between both sides of the Republican Party. Um, just out of caution, I'd say Texas will go down to likely. It's hard to say if a lot of the Hispanic voters in the southern part of the state, who a lot of them traditionally voted Democrat but went big for Donald Trump in 2024, they could be trending leftward. They might revert, but we'll really have to see how the trends hold up, because a lot of trends that happen across the country in a lot of areas for both parties tend to just be temporary or revert, or they become permanent. We'll have to see. But just because of out of caution, I'll put it as likely Republican. It is a Trump plus 13 to 14 state. So, I mean, it's pretty red state. I don't think Democrats going to win it, but I'll take it down to likely. Next is Nebraska. It's weird putting Nebraska as likely, but the Democrats are running an independent candidate, Dan Osborne. It's really hard to say if he will end up making this race competitive. He's a repeat candidate. They try to recreate the moment that they had to win. He already lost, and he's going against a much stronger incumbent senator than last time. Pete Ricketts is the Republican that Dan Osborne is going against. He was also the former governor as well. He's appointed to the seat after Ben Sasse resigned a few years ago. He just seems to have raised a lot of money. I see it as likely. It could end up going safe, but I'm going to keep it as likely out of caution just because of the environment. So that is a likely Republican state. We'll next go on to Iowa, another likely Republican. It's Trump plus 13 state, pretty red. You might see some reversion, so it'll go under probably around 8 or 9 points. Republicans are running Ashley Hinson, who is an overperformer. She represents like a moderately Republican district, but she turned it into like a Trump plus Hinson plus 15 district. So she's an overperformer. She'll probably win it by a lot. Democrats they have a primary to go through. It's hard to say if they're going to be able to pull it off. It's just hard to say, but there we go with that. And then we have, it's really hard to say if Ohio is going to be leans or likely, but I'll probably end up putting it as likely just because, I've talked about this before on the channel, but you had Sherrod Brown. He is a popular incumbent, but he still lost in 2024 to Bernie Moreno, who wasn't as strong as a Republican candidate. It's really hard to say what's going to end up happening. I do think Husted is much stronger. He's an incumbent now, appointed by Mike DeWine. I think that he'll be able to end up beating Brown probably about just over 5. It could go down to 4. It absolutely could, but we would really have to just see how that ends up going. I definitely could see it going under 5, but I think just because Ohio is a red state, it's just moved to the right a lot over the years. It's probably going to be likely. It kind of reminds me of the Virginia Attorney General election. You had Democrats did really well at the top of the ticket. You had Spanberger win by like 15. And you had a strong Republican incumbent, Jason Miyares, run. He overperformed by like 8 points. But he still lost because he couldn't overcome the top of the ticket, even though he was against a really weak candidate, Jay Jones. Similar situation with Sherrod Brown. Different state, different election, different environment, but similar. Like Sherrod Brown overperformed the top of the ticket by a lot. He was a strong incumbent, but he still lost just because the state is too partisan for him to win. Now, in a big blue wave, I could see him win, but I just tend to think that he will. Okay, so let's move on to the lean states. got quite a lot of them. Sorry about Maine. Lean Democrat states. We'll start off with North Carolina. You have Roy Cooper running, who is the former Democrat governor, very popular. Um, Polls have him up pretty high. I do end up thinking that he will win, but a lot of the times when governors run at the top of the ticket, they usually don't do too well. I mean, not it's not that they don't do too well, but it doesn't translate to the Senate. So I think I wouldn't count Michael Watley out. It's a very competitive state. Republicans typically do better at the federal level than the state level, but it yet to be seen what ends up happening. But it's probably going to be around a lean Democrat race, probably Cooper +3. Ossoff will also win by probably around 3. Republicans kind of have a messy primary to go through. You really don't know who's going to win which. It's really hard to say, but I think it's hard to say if Ossoff is that strong of an incumbent. It really has to be proven. He'll be running in a definitely much of a bluer environment this year. But I mean, 2020 was a kind of a blue environment too, so it's hard to say. But I do think he's the incumbent. He should definitely overperform the top of the ticket. Lean Democrat. Last lean Democrat I'd say is Michigan. You see, I originally had it as tilt Republican. It could be tilt Democrat, lean Democrat. It's going to be very competitive. I think the Democrat candidate's going to be Mallory McMorrow, who is kind of the balance between the more progressive and the more establishment sides of the Democratic Party. You have Abdul Asayed or Asayed, who is the more progressive Democrat. He would probably lose against Rogers. And then you have Haley Stevens, who is the more establishment Democrat. She is not a really strong candidate. She hasn't run a good campaign. If she ends up winning the Democrat nomination, it's going to be a true toss-up. But with McMorrow as the Democrat nominee, she seems to be able to fundraise pretty well. I'd say that she's slightly favored, probably around 1 point. Just Mike Rogers wasn't able to win in 2024, even with Trump on the ballot. So I'm thinking he probably won't be able to do so well at this, just because of the environment, right? Like, you don't have a Democrat in the White House, you have a Republican. So I just tend to think that just because of that, Mike Rogers would just narrowly lose, And he was mainly up in the polling because he had name recognition from his previous run. I still think Rogers could win. I just tend to doubt it'll happen. And then we have 2 lean Republican races. I'll start with Alaska. I'm taking it down to lean. It's usually a likely to safe Republican state. However, it's going down to lean because Democrats are running Mary Peltola, their former Democratic Congresswoman, strong candidate. Alaska's kind of a quirky state. So Dan Sullivan isn't the most popular senator. He is a Republican. He won by a lot in 2020. He's kind of moderate from what I hear from people. It's yet to be seen what happens. I just think Alaska is a red enough state for Sullivan to win, especially because he's an incumbent. But Peltola is a strong Democrat candidate, and this could definitely be a sleeper flip, definitely. But I still think it's about lean Republican as of now. Then we get to the most toss-up state, I think the state that could definitely defy national trends. It's really hard to say what's going to happen. With Maine, you have Susan Collins, the Republican incumbent, running. If you watch this channel enough, I think you know my opinion on this. In 2020, Susan Collins won by 9 points, when Joe Biden won the state by 9 points. She overperformed by 20, and her approval rating was in the toilet at the time, right? Every poll said she was going to lose. She was against a good candidate. She still was able to win by a lot, unexpectedly. Even if you took out the third-party candidate in there, she still would have won by around 5, 4. So I'm thinking this 2026 is probably going to be similar to 2020, in between that and 2018. So probably around D+5, 4 to be somewhere in between 4 and 6 national way for the Democrats. I just think Susan Collins is a well enough known incumbent that even though she always is told she's going to lose, she just manages to win every time. She's going to have to make sure she gets her Republican base to turn out, as well as to get independents and moderate Democrats to vote for her. I just think that just because she's kind of an electoral juggernaut, she's won even though she said she's not going to win. So I feel like it's a similar story that's panning out right now. So I'm rating this as leans for the Republican. I'll probably just leave it at leans or tilt just because of the environment. She's probably going to face the closest election of her career, no doubt about it. Now, I could see her end up losing if polarization kicks in. I just think that Susan Collins is a unique incumbent, like kind of like a one of a kind. She's like, she's been around in the Senate for a while. She's just able to win. So that's my prediction. The U.S. Senate goes down from 53 to Republicans to only 52. Republicans keep the Senate in my prediction. This map is subject to change as the election goes on. I hope you like this video. I hope to see you in the upcoming video. We'll have some good content to post in the future. Hope that you have a good day.